President Trump announced that he has ordered the deployment of 2 American nuclear submarines to strategic locations in reaction to recent threats made by former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev.
A threat was made by a former president of Russia, and we're going to protect our people.
What did Medvedev say to you that made you really mad?
Well, you just have to read what he said. He was talking about nuclear. When you talk about nuclear, we have to be prepared, and we're totally prepared.
The 2 leaders have exchanged jabs recently, following the White House's declaration giving Russia a 10-day deadline to accept a ceasefire in Ukraine or face severe economic sanctions. In reply, Medvedev reminded Trump that Russia still possesses nuclear strike capabilities. The exact destinations of these submarines remain undisclosed at this time. We'll soon have insights from Steve Rosenberg reporting from Moscow. But first, here's Gary O'Donoghue covering this lead story from Washington. Lately, Donald Trump's statements regarding Russia have become increasingly aggressive. "I find Russia's actions utterly appalling," he remarked. However, his tough talk has now escalated into tangible measures, as evidenced by the deployment of 2 nuclear submarines, though it remains unspecified whether these vessels are equipped with nuclear warheads. This move was in direct response to former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, who accused Trump of using ultimatums by threatening new sanctions on Russia if a ceasefire in Ukraine isn't reached. Medvedev argued that each ultimatum inches the world closer to a conflict, not just between Russia and Ukraine, but potentially involving the United States. Posting on Truth Social, Trump justified the deployment as a precaution in case Medvedev's inflammatory remarks weren't merely bluster. Words carry immense weight and can trigger unforeseen consequences. "I sincerely hope this isn't one of those cases," Trump wrote. The 2 had previously met in 2017 during a summit in Asia, where Medvedev described Trump as open and well-intentioned. Although Medvedev still holds a seat on Russia's National Security Council, he isn't considered a primary voice for Vladimir Putin, though his public statements often provoke strong reactions. Today, Putin, seen alongside his Belarusian ally, took a more subdued tone, suggesting that disappointment often stems from unrealistic expectations. The United States maintains a fleet of over a dozen submarines capable of carrying nuclear warheads, forming a crucial element of America's nuclear deterrent strategy known as the Triad, which comprises air, land, and sea-based systems. Submarines represent the stealthiest component of this nuclear force. Trump's latest ultimatum towards Russia is set to expire by the end of next week. He has already indicated skepticism that additional sanctions would influence Putin's stance. We'll return to Steve in Moscow shortly, but first, back to you, Gary, in Washington. Clive, this deployment of nuclear submarines seems nothing short of extraordinary. Wouldn't you agree? Indeed, Clive, it's a significant development. There's ambiguity over whether these are submarines armed with nuclear missiles or simply nuclear-powered vessels. That's an important distinction to make, and we're also unaware of their intended deployment locations. Just yesterday, both the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor tried to downplay Medvedev's comments, dismissing him as irrelevant to actual Russian decision-making. And yet today, President Trump is dispatching submarines in reaction to remarks from Medvedev. The seriousness of this move is still unclear. We're consistently reminded to take Trump's actions and words seriously, and in this instance, these are indeed concrete actions. Moments ago, the president stated that a threat was made, which he deemed unacceptable, prompting him to act to protect American citizens. This represents a considerable escalation, but time will tell if it evolves beyond rhetorical posturing. A critical juncture will come at the end of next week, coinciding with the deadline for Ukraine-related sanctions, which could also impact Russian trade partners like India and China. That deadline has now taken on heightened importance. Turning now to Steve in Moscow. Steve Medvedev, who once served as both Russian president and prime minister, and now acts as deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, has been a vocal critic of the West since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Hasn't he? Absolutely. What's interesting is that so far, the Kremlin, Russia's foreign ministry, and the defense ministry have all remained silent. It seems there's a lot of confusion here regarding what's unfolding and whether the U.S. submarine movements represent a significant shift. However, the Moscow Stock Exchange has reacted sharply, plunging in response. Based on the tone in local media, there's a palpable sense of surprise in Russia over Trump's latest statements. Frankly, I believe no one is more taken aback than Dmitry Medvedev himself. For over 3 years, Medvedev has been publishing bombastic and provocative posts on social media, most of which have gone largely unnoticed. But now, unexpectedly, he has captured the attention of the U.S. president in a major way. Meanwhile, while all this is unfolding, Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff is anticipated to arrive in Russia, possibly for discussions with Putin. One prominent Russian news outlet humorously likened Witkoff's appearance to a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, Trump being the magician in this metaphor. However, expecting Mr. Witkoff to magically resolve the current tensions seems like an unrealistic hope.